Hi, this is Bob Papa, voice of the New York Football Giants, and this is the Big Blue UK and Ireland podcast.
Welcome back, Giants fans, to this new series, and please welcome my guest for this episode, formerly of the United States of America, currently a UK citizen, I guess, for now, Ryan Disdier. How are you doing, mate? You good?
I'm doing great, Craig. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it, man.
No, thank you for coming on. Obviously, like we were saying just before, we spoke a few times, and it's nice to actually finally collab and get something together. So this is a brand new series we're doing with fans, content creators, and beat writers, just pretty much anyone getting their views on the Giants, how it's gone, how it's going to go next season, hopefully. And that's it, pretty much. So 5 questions, quick fire round, and we're done nice and quick. So we'll get into it straight away.
Perfect.
And it's the easiest question. How long have you followed the Giants, and why did you start?
It's a great question, and I think it surprises some people when I tell them, but I didn't grow up really liking sports. So I started following football in 2006. And the first football game, NFL game I ever watched was Giants. At the time, it was the Redskins with my dad, who grew up a really big Washington fan. He's from the DMV. So I watched that when we were in DC visiting a lot of my family, and for whatever reason, I decided to choose the Giants instead of Washington. And yeah, I've been following pretty routinely and pretty intently ever since then. And obviously a little bit of irony because I worked for the Commanders for about 2 seasons. So having to kind of hide my fandom for a little bit was a bit tough. But yeah, ever since 2006, it was something that kind of really caught my interest. And then, the way that season ended in the playoffs of the Eagles, it was a bit of a gut punch. And then the next year they won the Super Bowl. And I was like, oh my God, every year is going to be so great. And then after 2011, it's like every year was so bad. So since then, yeah.
I mean, that's pretty much just how it goes on. Like with us on the pod, like 2 of the guys have been fans since the Super Bowl time. I became a fan in 2013, the year before Odell joined,
Oh, tough
and
year.
yeah, and then Shane became a fan the year that Saquon joined because he was originally Penn State. So we're all relatively new to this. A couple of us have experienced some success. 2 of us, not a lot, really. So
Yeah,
yeah,
my
it's,
goodness.
it's it's a tough slog sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it definitely can be, but I think like it's not a great thing to say, but I think the fact that the Giants have had players over kind of the bad periods, I think I always go back to Odell and like how good he was during 6-10, 6-10. There was
Mm.
the 11-5 year in there, but like being able to watch a player like that during such down times kind of made it more enjoyable in hindsight. And I remember the division not being that great, so you always felt till like Thanksgiving that they were around. So, but yeah, no, it's been a bit brutal recently.
Cool. So, I'm guessing you saw Hard Knocks?
Yes, yeah, I had to, as I'm sure all of you guys did. I had to kind of figure out how to watch it because we don't have HBO over here. So I had to time it up with
Mhm.
when I was back in the States. I would download the episodes, then I would watch them on the flight. It was an ordeal, but yes, I was able to watch the entire series.
So it's obviously a incredible insight into our team, an insight that we've never got really outside of the Giants' life. YouTube videos, which we always said were never long enough, and then lo and behold, the Hard Knocks episodes were never long enough either. But what were your kind of major takeaways from Hard Knocks?
It's a really good question. I think the one that sticks out the most to me is obviously all the stuff about the quarterback and trying to
Mm.
trade up. And I think, it was pretty easy to decipher when all those rumors were happening that, like, no, they weren't trying to trade up for Joe Alt. No, they weren't trying to get Marvin Harrison Jr. Like, it was for a quarterback. And I think just seeing the intricacies of that process was really fascinating to me. And I think the second thing was the level of kind of power and I think to some extent, I hope to some extent, autonomy that Joe Shane has to kind of run the ship the way he sees fit. Where John Mara was saying, I'm going to lose a lot of, or I'm going to, I don't remember what he said, have a conniption if we lose Saquon. He goes to the Eagles, giving his input in various areas. And Joe Schoen was kind of able to explain the thought process, where I feel like in previous regimes, definitely the regime prior, you didn't have that. You didn't have that kind of dialogue or kind of pushback. And I think that was refreshing. I came away very refreshed and more, I think, optimistic about the process that Joe Schoen has. We're being able to have him explain in a more candid setting than a press conference. Okay, here's why we did this. Here's why we didn't do this. I think that was really fascinating to see. And I really personally enjoyed the negotiation process for the Brian Burns deal and the connection that he has with Dan Morgan. I thought that was a really, really interesting kind of peek behind the curtain. But yeah, I think it was the quarterback and then just kind of the way that Joe Schoen is running it. Like it's clearly his show, which I think is good.
It's interesting because I think we kind of all assume as fans that the 32 GMs are just 32 people, businessmen who end up kind of, doing deals with each other. And yeah, they kind of like each other, but to see the sort of dynamic between Joe and Dan and how they're pretty much like best friends, just happen to be two GMs of 32 teams, is crazy, really. And I suppose it gives them both, because they're both relatively new as GMs, a nice foundation and somebody to kind of lean on in the tough times.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think it was funny where the scene where he's like, are we really trying to haggle over a seventh round pick? Like, let's just get the deal done. It's like kind of reminds you when you're playing fantasy with your mates and they send just like a crazy offer. And it's like, what are we doing here? And it's like, yeah, to your point, having that relationship, I think is really cool to see, especially. And like, I don't want to, it's the second time I'm bringing up the previous regime, but like, especially because the last GM, I don't think really had that at all with a lot of other GMs. And I think being able to see like the complete inverse with Shane has been very cool to see.
Obviously, there were a lot of funny parts out of Hard Knocks, a lot of sort of family stuff, and just a real myriad across the board of different angles. What was probably your favorite moment, like specific scene from it?
I think it was just because you don't get to see it that much. I think with the NFL draft, it's like you get the first round and everybody is so zeroed in and locked in on it. And then, Friday is excitement. And then Saturday, it all kind of dwindles. But I think being able to see the cameras in the room for, the thought process around like, all right, we're going to try to target Kool-Aid McKinstry. That's who we want. And then seeing him go and it's like, ooh, okay, how do we kind of pivot here and how do we figure out how to still get quality players? And I also think that the part about Theo Johnson and kind of how much they were locked in on him was really interesting to see. But yeah, outside of that, I mean, I think the big one is the meeting with the Patriots at the combine. I think that's just like I never thought that they would ever greenlight that kind of access. So to see it was a bit mind blowing.
Yeah, and just simply like, I'm just going to take a stroll across to the other side of the stadium and see what happens, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Right, so let's have a chat about last season. How do we sum up? How do we sum up and try to analyze what the hell happened last year?
I think best way is probably catch 22. I think it's also probably like it was almost a complete 180 of what happened in 2022, where I think you can point to maybe I'm just going to say off the top of my head 5 or 6 games from 2022, right? It was Baltimore, Jacksonville, Tennessee, Washington with the phantom no PI call, and I'm sure I'm
Mm,
missing one, or Green Bay in London actually.
mm,
And there were 5 games that year where they lost by, let's say, a total of 10 yards. And
mm,
they got lucky. And that's what happens in sport. That's what happens in football. Sometimes you get lucky. And I think that this year it was the total opposite, where you had games like Buffalo, the Jets, the Rams, the Patriots, or not the Patriots, but a couple others where it was like they were just 1 yard, 2 yard away from winning those games. And then
mm,
quickly you go from, all right, this is a team picking in the top 7 to, okay, this is a team maybe fighting for that last playoff spot. I think obviously the health of Daniel Jones and Saquon got hurt. The offensive line was just so beat up, and there was no chemistry. And I think the coaching was a little
mm.
bit at fault as well. So I would say it was kind of like one of those everything bad that can happen will happen. And it was just such a bizarre. I've never seen a season like this. It was so bizarre where they looked so bad for stretches in the beginning, and then with Tommy DeVito, they got some life. And it was similar to 2013, your first year watching, but I don't remember a single game from that year where it was like, I'm having fun watching this. Where at least this year it was like the Monday night Packers game. I'm sure you did as well. I woke up at 1 a.m. to watch that one, and I was like, this is an exciting game. At least we got this. So yeah, I think it was a lot of bad luck. Obviously, like, look, they didn't field a great team, but a lot of the injuries and just some of the breaks, I think, just didn't go their way this year.
Yeah, yeah, totally. The injuries played a ridiculously big part in the downfall of the Giants last year, and it pretty much started within 5 minutes of that
Yeah,
first game with Andrew
so
Thomas.
bad.
So you couldn't make it up. But if we kind of flip over to this season, without giving a prediction because that comes later, what are your kind of expectations and hopes?
I think they'll be better. I think my expectations are they'll be a competitive team, especially against teams within the same kind of like skill level. So like teams like Minnesota week 1, I think they'll be competitive. Teams like Washington, like you expect to beat teams like that. I think you would hope they're a little bit more buttoned up, especially along the offensive line with some of the additions. I think my hope would be that, like, look, it's been since 2016 and the Giants haven't competed with Philly or Dallas at all. You
Mm,
get a few wins here and there. The COVID year was the COVID year, but they haven't beat Dak since 2016. So my hope would be with the core that Joe Shane has acquired and assembled, that they can be competitive and start to beat Dallas, start to beat Philly more regularly. Just because, like, until you can do that, I really don't think this team will do much of anything. Like, yeah, it's good to not be the worst team in the division over the past 5 years, but I don't want that. Like, I want us to be able to win more playoff games and like
mm.
challenge for division titles. Every other team in the division has won at least 3 times since we've won last in 2011. It's like it's unacceptable. And my hope is that things are starting to turn and they can start to get some wins against Dallas and Philly. But yeah, we'll see. I've been saying that for years.
I mean, the win against Philly last year almost felt like a bit of a token win because
Yeah.
they were in a bad spot. We weren't really fighting for anything. It would be nice to beat them when something matters, like it actually has something behind it. Because yeah, it's all good and well getting like a participation win at the end of the
Yeah.
season, but you're right. It would be nice to kind of actually stick it to them and have it affect the league as a whole by that
Yeah.
point.
No, I
Um,
totally agree.
So if you look at the draft and free agency, we've brought in a hell of a lot of players and some real talent as well, through trades or through signings, or like we said, through the draft picks that we had. Who do you think is going to make the biggest impact this season? And is it obvious?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think the two obvious ones are Malik Neighbors and Brian Burns. I think Neighbors, what he's going to do on offense, it's just going to be. I think it's just going to be a totally different brand of football. Like, even though, and I wasn't able to watch any of the preseason game live against Houston, but like just some of the plays he was making, we really haven't had anybody who could even kind of think about doing that since Odell. So I think
Mm,
that what he'll be able to bring will just be so great to see. And on defense, like adding a proven premier, hopefully he still has some room to grow. Pass rusher like Brian Burns is going to make all the worlds of difference. I'm really personally excited to see what Tyler Nubin can bring. I hope that it was funny. It's like for so many years, the Giants had this trend of like drafting a very good to great, I would say, defensive tackle in the second round, whether it was Linval Joseph, John Hankins, Dalvin Tomlinson. And then finally
mm,
with Dexter Lawrence, it was like, okay, no, we got one who we're going to keep, and he's great. Like, he's turned from good to very good to great. And I feel like we've kind of seen a similar trend start with safeties, where it was like, okay, they drafted Landon Collins and he was great for a little bit of time. Then they bring in Xavier McKinney and now he's gone. And it's like, I hope that Tyler Nubin can come in. And from everything that, you read about him in college, just such a smart player. And we saw it a little bit in the first preseason game. He's so physical. I think that I'm really hoping that he can break the trend. But I think a very underrated one for me is Isaiah McKenzie on offense, mostly because, yeah, he's got familiarity with the system, but I think having a more just like an older veteran presence, like I actually wish in some regards that like Malik Neighbors' rookie year was overlapping with Shepard's last year, just because I think that having that, like I've been telling friends, like I kind of hope that Allen Robinson makes the final 53. I don't think he will because he doesn't offer much on special teams, but I think if things get tough, having a veteran presence who can kind of help guide Malik Neighbors along, because he said in Hard Knocks, like he gets pissed off if he doesn't get the ball. I like that. I know that Brian Dable likes it, but it's like I think having that kind of calming presence will go a long way, especially in New York, man. Like if you are unhappy or like it's not going well, it can be tough. So I'm hopeful that Isaiah McKenzie contributes and also is able to provide a sort of kind of veteran guidance for Malik Neighbors and Jalen Hyatt for that matter. He's also very young, and Wan'Dale Robinson. Like it's a young group outside of Darius Slayton.
I mean, it's a young team. We have like 7 players over the age of like 32 or something, or 30, I think it is. So it's a very young team across the board. So yeah, I mean, any veteran presence we can have in any room, I think is handy. I mean, I wasn't going to touch on this, but we'll talk about it anyway, just because we've got a bit of time. So the Texans game was rough, obviously, for the first team offense for those first few plays. How do you see this playing out with Daniel Jones? Do you think he'll grow into it? Once he realizes he actually has more time with his offensive line, or do you think he's just broken?
I think, unfortunately, it's probably more of the latter, just because, like the thing with Daniel Jones with me that I always go back to, you go back to when the pick was made. And the Giants were ridiculed by everybody because it was deemed that they drafted a player. They totally reached for a player who wasn't a top 15, a top 32 level talent. And I think that's accurate. So for me, in my head, I've always thought it's honestly a little unfair for Daniel Jones to have been put in that position by the GM to kind of have to have the expectations to develop into a player that he just isn't. Like if he turns it around this year, I'll gladly eat my words and I'll gladly be happy that I was wrong. But like it's year 6, guys. Like we've been waiting and waiting, and like the offensive line's been bad. Yes. He really hasn't had any weapons, but he's also played really poorly. Like those things can exist independently of each other. Like it's not because of this is the only reason. Like there are multiple reasons. I think he'll be better this year. Like, can he get back to 2022 where he's more of a game manager? Yeah, probably. But then like, do you really want him to be that if you drafted Malik Neighbors and you want to see Jalen Hyatt? Like, I'll probably regret saying this, but I kind of wish that he would turn into like a Jameis Winston in Tampa, where it's just like kind of spray and pray, where he's going to take a lot of deep shots. He's going to turn it over, but like he's going to turn it over anyways. Like let's at least try to stretch the field and like give these playmakers a chance to go and score points. I think he'll be better than last year. Like last year was really tough, and the circumstances that he was put in were awful. And like, I think it was a really a tough time for him, and I think he does have the right mental headspace. So I think he'll be better, but I think that this is, I mean, unless he wins 2 playoff games and gets us to the NFC Championship, I think this is almost certainly the final year for Daniel Jones in New York.
It's amazing because obviously people have always been harsh on him for turning over the ball. But if you turn around to a lot of Giants fans and said, "Hey, Daniel Jones is going to have 25 touchdowns and 25 interceptions this year, and we're going to be, around the 7, 8, 9 win mark," you probably take it.
Yeah, no, I think I would.
Right. Let's go into the predictions bit, the quick fire bit. Most valuable Giant on offense to the season.
Sorry, most what?
Valuable. Most
Oh,
valuable Giant.
I think it's got to be Andrew Thomas. I think we saw what happened last year. I think if he were to miss time, it's a little bit better than last year with better coaching. Jermaine Illuminor, who could theoretically kick out, maybe Evan Neal. Like, I think it's a better, but like, man, he's the domino. If he goes, like, I think the offense goes as he goes, and if he's out, then I think we start firing up those mock drafts.
And what about on the opposite side on defense?
I'm going to say Deontay Banks. He's obviously not the best player, but I think
Mm,
where the position group is in terms of depth and talent, I think that if he were to go down, like, I think things get really, really tricky. And that's also expecting him to kind of take a really big leap in year three,
mm,
or excuse me, year two. But that whole unit, I think, is full of very, very valuable players. Like, I think Bobby Okereke is invaluable. Dexter Lawrence obviously is very, very valuable. But I would say, given the current makeup of the team, I would probably say Deontay Banks.
yeah, absolutely sound, logic behind that. So, you kind of touched on this in one of the previous questions, but we'll make you choose one. Surprise package. So the way I put this is last year I said Jason Pinnock would be our surprise package player that we didn't think was going to really give us more than just kind of below average play, but actually ended up being a key cog.
That is a good one. I know I did mention Isaiah McKenzie. It's a really good mix of players that you could go with right now. I know that Talking Giants, they love Gervarius Owens. I think that if he gets playing time, he could be fun to watch. I'll always be loyal to Cordell Flott for no reason other than the bit, just because I think I don't know, it's a funny bit to me. I'm going to say Theo Johnson. I think that if he gets healthy and established and changes that damn number from 47, I think he could be a little bit of what we all thought Darren Waller would be, where he can
Mm,
be kind of like that athletic vertical tight end. And I think his potential is through the roof. It's just about, I mean, it takes these tight ends, with the exception of like Sam Laporta last year, who was a little bit of an outlier. I feel like
mm.
they're one of the positions historically where it takes them a little bit of time to get adjusted. So I look at it as like any positive reps that he can get this year, I think will be much more valuable for year 2 and 3. So I'll go with Theo Johnson.
Yeah, you need to have a chat with Shane. Shane's a Penn State boy, and absolutely detests the number that Theo Johnson is currently wearing. He's literally waiting until that number's changed to get the
Yes.
jersey. So,
Yeah, I need it.
right. So the big important one, team record.
I'm gonna go with 9-8. I think they've got a favorable schedule. I've been telling everybody who will listen, usually after a couple pints, that I do think they're gonna make the playoffs this year. So I'm gonna stand by that. I think they'll go 9-8. I think I'll add a caveat that's assuming they start hot. They got
Mm,
Minnesota at home against Sam Darnold, Washington at Washington, a place where they've historically done really, really, really well. And
mm.
then Cleveland, and I have no idea what to expect from them. So if they could start like 2-1, I think that should be looking pretty decent for the rest of the season. But yeah, I think that getting those two, hopefully starting 2-0, I think it'll help everything. But yeah, I'm going 9-8.
Awesome. Well, that's all the questions done. Thank you so much for joining me, Ryan. Now,
Sure.
obviously, you've now joined the ranks of YouTube and released your first video. So, do you want to just let the guys know where they can find you on X, and then obviously where they can find your YouTube channel as well?
Yes, of course, and thank you very much for having me. I sincerely appreciate it. On Twitter or X, I'm just at Ryan Disdier, so first name, last name, and then on YouTube, yeah, I just launched the channel. Really, really enjoying it. Wanted to do it for a while. I think my channel name is just RDNYG. I'm not 100% sure, but I hope it is. So yeah, you can check it out there.
We'll make sure that we put your socials in the description anyway. We've been doing it for everyone, so we'll
Yeah.
find it.
Cheers. Thank you.
Right, so everyone, we hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and all that lovely stuff. Check out our social links in the description down below and Ryan's. And until next time, let's go Giants.